I'll hand over to Filip. Filip's over from Sydney, so please make him welcome.
Hi, thanks for coming in with such short notice. So we're going to talk about some universal applications for Windows and Windows Phone. It's pretty interesting when you look back in time to see that when you want to make a Windows Phone application or a desktop application or a Metro application, it's always been like a divided crowd who can create this application and who cannot do that. It's also been pretty hard when we want to share stuff between the different platforms. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. I'll be recording this session as well. If it turns out good, I'll put that up on my YouTube channel so you can rewatch this and share with your friends. So I'm Filip Ekberg. I'm a C# MVP and a senior developer at Readify. You have my email address and my blog link here. You can just send me any questions you might have about C# or universal applications. Please follow me on Twitter and send me questions there as well. I've also written this book called C# Smorgasbord. It covers the vast variety of different technologies, patterns, and practices in C#. And I'll do something cool here. So if you take a picture of me and tag me on Twitter and post a picture of this session, I'll raffle a book after this talk and give it to someone that deserves it. The rest of you can buy it. All right. So we have a bit of an agenda here. We have about 1 hour or until we look too tired. We start to talk about the history. What have we seen up until today, and what might come in the future. And in the future, we're going to talk about the universal applications, and that's what comes after we talk about the history. And then we have a lot of demos. I'm mostly going to spend my time here writing some code. We'll write some code from the bottom up so you can follow along with what normal development for a phone looks like, and then how we can port this to a Windows device. And then be my guest and interrupt me whenever you want to ask questions. But if you want to wait to the end, that's fine as well. We can do a Q&A after this session. So a bit of the history with application development for Windows Phone app and Windows applications. You might know something called Windows Forms. I'm a bit shameful to admit that about a year ago, I started making a Windows Form application. It hurts, I know, but that's a fact. And I know a lot of people start doing Windows applications today and choose to do that in Windows Forms because it's so rapid and easy to do that. However, after Windows Form was sort of not the newest thing to use anymore, WPF came to the market. And WPF helped us make really rich applications for the desktop. And I myself really liked going from Windows Form into doing stuff in Windows Presentation Foundation because it made my customers look a bit different on my applications. I could make them a lot more beautiful. And then we have Windows Mobile. That's the thing that came before Windows Phone, right? It's a long time ago, but a lot of people use Windows Mobile. And if you made things in .NET for the desktop or for the web, and you wanted to make something for Windows Mobile, that was a completely different story. You could run some .NET applications on the Windows Mobile, but you still had to make a lot of adjustments. And then we have Windows Phone 7, which made it a bit easier. And this was released a lot later than iOS and Android, so they learned from their mistakes with their APIs. If you've done applications for iOS or Android, it really is a horrible experience. And they fixed that with Windows Phone. It's really as you would develop an application for the desktop. So you create your applications using Silverlight, and you do your SAML, and all that is really awesome. And then we have Windows Phone 8, which is the same as Windows Phone 7, but a different API. So you can't really just take your code and that works on the new device, because you have to do some new stuff, right? They figured out that there are a couple of things in our platform that are good enough, so we need to revise that and make it better. So they're introducing breaking changes. And then we have Silverlight, which is sort of deprecated now, but not really, because in Windows Phone 8.1, they're calling the, let's go back to Windows Phone 8 first. So in Windows Phone 8, they called this applications using SAML, C# and SAML apps for Windows Phone 8. And now they're calling it Windows Phone 8.1 applications in Silverlight. So they're bringing back this naming here again. So it's sort of like telling us that we're caring about Silverlight, but not really. And at this time, when it comes to code sharing, our applications look like this. So my clients ask me, can you develop a Windows application to handle all our customers? And I'm fine with that. And then they ask me, can you port this to our Windows Phone 7 or Windows Phone 8 platforms? And I have to rewrite almost all of the code. I could just share the backend stuff or the core things, which are written in .NET. Today, with the universal applications, which I'm going to show you later, we end up with something like this. So we share most of the code, but we can divert into different directions for each platform. So the programming model for this is something that probably a lot of you have seen before. So we have the SAML, and the backend of that is C or C++, and we have C# and VB. And that is used together with SAML. And on the other hand, we can use HTML and CSS and write the code in JavaScript. So you do that on Vue.js or you do it on through C#. And they both rely on the Windows runtime. And then that connects down to the Windows kernel and all that, and it handles all the different things for us. This was introduced with Windows 8, and the problem with this was that we had a similar experience on the phone, but we couldn't use the same code for all the devices. So the problem is, we have our Metro application, which is full screen, and everyone hates that. Everyone just wants to take the Metro application and run that on the desktop like a normal desktop application. And since it's C# and SAML, why can't we just take that and run this on the phone as well? Should be easy enough. So that's what the universal applications is all about. Here I have Visual Studio 2013. I've installed the latest update that gives me access to the Windows Phone 8.1 and the Windows 8.1 Update 1 stuff. And what I can do here is that I have two projects. The first project is for Windows Phone, and then I have another project for Windows Store applications. And then I have a new thing here, which you can't really see here. It says shared. So this isn't a real project type, but it's a way for us to share the code between our different platforms. So what happens here is that during compile time, it's going to take all the files we have in the share project and pull that into the project for Windows Phone and for Windows and compile that with the solution. This means that we have completely code sharing between these two devices. And here we have the same application running on the Windows Phone and on the Windows tablet. And they look different because the devices are different. But this is because the runtime, and when this compiles, the compiler will compile this differently for the different target. So what about the desktop? So far, we've only been able to look at how can we run this on the Windows Phone and how can we run this on the RT or our tablets. The thing is, in the coming future, we're getting back to Start menu. So we can pin things to the Start menu, just like we have the huge thing that takes up the entire screen. We have that in a smaller space, and we can pin stuff there and see a lot of the nice updates, which I personally like about the Metro experience. And then we can run these Metro applications in Windows here like we've been able to do before. It's a really bad experience, personally, to get thrown into the face like this full screen application when I just want that either snap to the side, but if I start a Metro application snap to the side, it takes over the desktop anyway. So I have to go back and say that I want to show the desktop, and that's really a problem. It takes the focus from me. It's not really productive. So what happens here is that now we can take our modern applications and run these in windowed mode as well. And since we support different resolutions, we can also support resizing the window. We can support all the different Windows Phone devices, and we can support all the tablets. So what's the deal with this? We're sharing the code for the backend, which is the C# code that we've shared before, which isn't really something new. So it's sort of like using portable class libraries. And that's really a good benefit that we have when we're talking about different platforms as well. So if we talk about Xamarin and iOS and Android, we can share our code using portable class libraries to all our different platforms that support .NET. However, in this case, we can also share the front end. So the problem with sharing the front end is that when it comes to larger devices or even smaller devices, it's going to be a different how we want to display things. So we need to be able to create a platform-specific interface for things that are not as we expect them to be. So these platform-specific things can be, if I have a list of a lot of items, I maybe want to have 2 columns instead of just 1 column, which I have on the phone, and on the tablet I have 2 columns. What happens here is that I have all the code that I share in my shared project, And when there's a difference between the platforms, I just create this specific view. I still share the view model and everything, but the view I create in the separate projects, and that all works fine. So what's the catch with sharing a lot of things? Well, we're going to end up with a lot of if definitions in our code. And this doesn't really look beautiful. This is a code smell though, so when you turn out to have a lot of these things, you might want to pull these out and put them into the different projects. So we'll see these here in just a moment. I'll be coding a lot now, so let me know if I do this too fast or too slow. We'll head over to Visual Studio 2013, and I'm going to create a new project. And here you can see that when I've installed the latest update for Visual Studio, I get this store apps, which we've had for a long time. And then I also get universal applications and Windows Phone applications and Windows applications. So what I'll do here is that I'll start to create a Windows Phone application. Because in the most cases, our customer is going to ask us, can you please create a Windows Phone application, or can you create a tablet version for us, or a desktop version, or even a website? But in this case, we're talking about the phone and the desktop. So in reality, they're going to ask us, can you please create this application for us that runs on this Windows Phone? And we'll start doing that, and the week before we release the application, the customer asked us, so can we just take this and run this on the tablet as well? Which isn't really the case, right? So what we're going to do here is that we're going to start off creating this Windows Phone application just as we would if the customer asked us. And this application here will be a simple news application. So it's going to be for my corporate, so I'm going to have all the news items, in this case, statically defined inside my application. And if we have time in the end, I'll move this over to Azure and pull that down with a mobile service. So let's call this news app. And just need to get my tablet started here. So it starts. The first thing that I want to do in this application is that I want to get rid of all the pre-created stuff. So we have app.saml and mainpage.saml. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to bring in something else to help me create this application in a good manner. So let's just get rid of these here and hope that I have internet connection. So I'm going to install a package called Caliburn. Caliburn helps us conform to MVVM patterns. So what this means is that I'm going to create a view model and say to my application that navigate to this view model. And then the application is going to figure out which view it shows. So I can, from my code, say that I want to navigate to this view model when I click this thing here. And it's all very decoupled and very nice. It's just a good way to structure the application. And we can do that in the NuGet package manager by doing install package and then do caliburn.micro. I'm going to get the pre-release because I want the latest version. So hopefully I have shared my internet connection and this works. Looks good. So this is installed into my application now. So the next thing that I need to do is that I need to create a new app.saml file that tells me that this application is a Caliburn application and everything that I ask for is going to be injected automatically. So sort of set up the inversion of control container. I've already created that file because I don't like to write boilerplate code. So let's see where we have that. A little hint here, when you bring in app.saml files, it thinks that these things are pages. So you need to go into the build action and change that to be a application definition. All right, the next thing I need to change here, as you see here, we have this micro::Caliburn application. So now this defines that my application, when I run this, is a Caliburn application. And everything that it does behind the scenes is going to be interpreted by Caliburn. So we call this news app. I can spell. And then we have our app.saml file. We need to change this to news app as well. Let's compile this and hope that it works. Sometimes when bringing in files like this, especially the app definition, it doesn't work. And it seems like I might have been forgetting to get rid of a couple of things. Don't want to show you too much of the stuff that I'll be doing later. We just get rid of these things. All right, now this should compile. So this succeeded. If I run this application, hopefully nothing happens. So I have the Windows Phone 8.1 emulator here. How many of you guys do have a Windows Phone? Whoa, that's awesome. Do you have the latest update? Do you love Cortana? Oh, she can't understand you, right? All right, so nothing happened. The application didn't work. So I'll show you the code here, what happens when I brought this code in here. So this all is a Caliburn application, as we see here in the app.sample file. If I go to the code behind, we'll see that it looks fairly similar to what we are used to. We have the app up here, and we run the initialize component, and then we have something else here that overrides a method from Caliburn. So this configures the application. We register a WinRT container, and we register some services and some sharing services, and that's all boilerplate that we need to tell Caliburn to do in order for the things that I want to do to work. Then we have a lot of other stuff here that we override, and later on we're going to navigate to a full view model in here, and Caliburn will figure out which view to show. So now I want to create two different folders here. One for the views, and one for the view models. And the first view model that I want to create is the main view model. The main view model will show a list of news items that I have in my application. So essentially, I have my main view model that has a list of news items. So we can call this main view model. Let's do this public. And let's have a property for a observable collection. And let's create a new class called news item view model. Let's call this items. All right, so now we need to create this class as well. News item view model. And what I want my items to contain is simply a heading and a URL. The URL points to somewhere, and I want to show that URL when I click on the news item. I want to go to that URL or open that up in a web view. It's pretty simple. So we have the heading, and we have the URI. And we can go up to the main view model here, and I can set up in my constructor that my items collection is a new observable collection of these things here. And then we can just add a couple of items. So let's say heading is Melbourne 1, the URI can be Readify.net. Let's just copy and paste this here a couple of times. Let's compile this to see that it works. Oh, I forgot to.
URI equals.
Sorry?
URI equals.
Oh, thank you. That's better. Can't understand why I didn't figure that out.
It's not a sharp enough.
Would that work? That's pretty cool. You know, Rustlin, the C# compiler is open source. You can go fix that. Or not. All right, so this compiles and it all works. So now I need to tell Caliburn that I have this view model. So when I tell Caliburn to navigate to this view model, I want it to create the default instance for my main view model. And it's pretty simple to do that. I can go in here into the configure in my app.saml, and I can tell this to the container which Caliburn uses to register different types. I can tell this to per request, I want you to create this main view model, which is pretty simple. Now I just need to tell Caliburn somehow to navigate to this to this view model or to the view corresponding to this view model. So we could simply say display root view, and then say main view, not view model. So I don't have that view yet, so I need to go and create that. Essentially what's going to happen here is that when the application launches, Caliburn will create this view here and display that for us. It will instantiate the view, sorry. So we can go ahead and create a new sample file. Let's just call this main view. And here's a couple of new things that are added with the latest update. We can, for instance, change what this thing looks like here. So we can say that this is a tablet. We can say it's a larger, smaller. There's a device thing here, so we can change this to different types of devices, which is pretty neat. So we can see how what this looks like on different devices. And when I add the shared project later on, remember that I'm just creating this like the normal old way, but it's still a Windows Phone 8.1 application. But what I want to do later on is that I want to say that this is also a Windows application. So then we can see these side by side, which is pretty neat. So we have this view here. I'm going to add a stack panel instead of a grid. We can do a stack panel. And let's add a margin to make this look a bit nicer. And the first thing I have in my stack panel is a text block to display the header. Let's have a larger font size. Let's say awesome news app. And beneath this, I want to add a list view. And in this list view, I want to bind to something. Let's see if we can widen this up a bit. So what do I bind to here?
I think the view model.
Exactly. So what happens is that Caliburn will automatically inject this view model here. It helps us with a lot of boilerplate stuff. So we can do item source is equal to type binding and items. So this will bind to this property in here, so we can get access to these items. It's pretty standard. So I want to just simply display these items I have here in a fashion that I like. So I want to do a list view dot item template, and I want to set up the data template, and this is going to show the text block, and let's say font size 24 to make this a bit larger, and add a margin as well, just to make that nice. And the text here, now that we're inside the collection of news items, I can simply bind to the heading and show that. I just need to get rid of that. Let's compile this and see if this works. Come on. There we go. So now that I run this, hopefully it's going to show me a list of news items. That'll work. It's pretty simple. So I told Caliburn to give me this list here. I told Caliburn to navigate to this view model. It's all pretty simple, but it's still a nice thing to have when we start creating our application. Now, the next thing that I want to do here is I want to add a handler for when I click this item here. So this isn't only a how do we create universal applications, because that would take me 2 minutes. This is also a how do we conform to the best practices when we create Windows Phone applications and Windows applications. So it's a nice to have information. Right, so what I want to do here now is that I want to add, when I click this item or this text block, I want to fire some event. The simplest way to do that is to simply add a tapped event here, and then go to the code behind and add the event handler. But then I would probably be thrown out here, so let's not do that. Instead, what I want to do is that I want to make use of Caliburn. I want to tell Caliburn that attached to this text box, and I have an action that I run, pass it some data. It's really very, very magical. In order for me to use Caliburn, I need to import the namespace, and I have that in my app.saml, so I'm just going to copy that over. Now I can go down here to my text block, and and we have access to a couple of cool things. So I can do microcolon message and then attach. Now I can attach to a certain event and tell this to run some action on my view model. This is where it starts to get pretty amazing. So we can say that we have an event called tapped. And when this is clicked, I want to invoke an action called tapped. And I'm going to pass the data context. This is pretty cool. If this works, this is pretty cool. I'm just making up stuff to sound cool. So now I'm going to go into my view model. I'm going to add a method here, public. What did I call it? I call it tap, right? Let's call it tap1 just to make sure it does work. Use item view model. That's what I expect to get here. Now I call this tap1 here and compile the application, and it doesn't really give me a compilation error. But if I run this, it's going to crash because it can't find this method. So now that I run this, I have a breakpoint in here. I pass the data context, and the data context for the row that I'm clicking, that's the new item view model. When I click this here, I'm inside the method. I have a reference to the item that I clicked. That's pretty cool. It's all very magical. I'm usually against the magic strings, but the alternative to create an event handler here and then raise a domain event in the code behind, that's equally magical, right? So I like this way. So now what we want to do when I click this here, I want to navigate to somewhere else. And in order to do that, I want to, from my view model, say that navigate somewhere. But how do I do that? Well, since I'm creating the instance of this class with Caliber, I can simply do constructor injection and have it give me the navigation service. What that means is I can use the iNavigation service. Now that I have that accessible, I can simply go down here and say navigate to a view model. So I could say navigate to a detailed view model. I haven't created that yet, but I'll do that in just a second. But what happens now is that I tell Caliburn to find the view for the detailed view model, create an instance of the detailed view model, and show me that on the screen. I can even tell this to inject the item. Whoops. So let's wire that up. In order to get this to work, even compiling, we need to add a detailed view model. Now the detailed view model, the detailed view model simply has one thing. We have the parameter passed to this view model. So this is also pretty magical. So if I just copy this name here, I have the new item view model passed into this thing here. And since this is a parameter, Caliburn will set whatever property is called parameter to the value that I pass into this magical view model. It's like using magical strings again, right? Because the navigation model in Windows Phone is a bit different from different platforms. So what happens is that every time you navigate to a different view, it uses a URI. And you can't have like infinite amount of data in a URI. That's like going to a website and having the largest get string, query string ever, right? And that's not really a good idea. So generally, what you do is that you just pass an ID of an object, and then you load that again from the view model. But in this case, we are simply passing two strings, so that works. All right, so now that we've set this up, if we start the application and see what happens, hopefully it crashes because we don't have a view for the details view, and we haven't really set up anything inside our application to understand what a details view model is. So we need to go into the app.sample.cs and register this one here as well. Just as I did with the main view model, I need to say that per request, I need to create a details view model. And now I also need to add a details view. It's going to be a SAML file. I'll select the blank page. I'll do a details view. I'll just copy whatever I have in my main page and get rid of the things that I don't like. So in the details view, instead of showing the the awesome news app text, I want to display something else. I want to say that the text here is the, yeah, exactly, parameter heading. So I'm accessing the parameter called parameter, and I'm accessing the property header. It's pretty simple stuff. And then down here, I want to show a web view instead of a list view. And that's also pretty simple. I can simply create a web view here. I can set the source to the finding parameter.uri.
Just misspelled parameter.
It's better?
Yeah.
Thanks. I just need to make the web view a bit larger. The problem with Windows Phone is that there's no concept of automatic hide of a web view, at least not that I found. So what you need to do is you need to force the height of the web view or calculate that during runtime. But this makes it a bit simpler. All right, so if I run this again, I have some other problems I've never seen before.
Did you change menu details?
Thank you. That's why you should never copy and paste. I just need to find the source. Problem. Details. You compile this here. Yes. Need to close that.
Do you have to change the code behind as well?
No, I just copied over the sample. So now that I click this here, hopefully it worked. Looks pretty good. And hopefully that loads Readify.net, which is just like it does. Now you could do a lot of cool changes here. You could make it show a spinner or something like that, but that's out of this talk. Now I want to go back to the list. So I click this back button here, and it crashed the application. That's not an ideal experience. So now we're ending up with, we need to add something platform specific. In this case, so far we've just added sample stuff, we've just had some view models. There's no really Windows Phone specific stuff here. If we take a step back and just think about the universal applications. So the stack panel, or the text block, or the web view, they have the different meaning on different devices. So on Windows Phone, the web view is like this tiny container, and it runs Internet Explorer 11. And on the tablets, they might run the latest IE, which is 12 next year or something like that. So we don't really know what happens here. We just have to rely on the framework to sort this out for us. And that's exactly what's going to happen. So on the tablet, the web view will be something, and on the phone, the web view will be something else. It might be the same, but we don't really care. We just care about this sample being the same. So what I need to do to make the back button work, I need to go into the code behind of the details view. And in the on-navigated to, I'm going to hook up an event to listen to when I click the back button. And this code isn't really that pretty. It lives in windows.phone.ui.input, hardware buttons, back pressed, attach an event to this, create the method, say that this is handled. And we can tell the also need to unsubscribe to the event. Have you ever created an application using MVVM and stuff like this and forgot to deregister from your events and be shot by that in the foot later on? I created this application once that handled transactions, and when the transaction finished, it went back to the start screen, and I just spun up a new view model. I found out that when I purchased like 3 or 4 things, I just got like 4 receipts back. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on here, and it's because the receipt printing event was still listening to that, and the framework couldn't collect for the memory that I was previously hooked up to. So it's a good idea to always clean up your events. So what I want to do here now is that I want to call it frame and do go back, just to go back to the previous step. And that's really all there is to it to get the back button working. And that works. However, that's the first thing that we added, the first thing we added in the code behind, which is a code smell. We could possibly do this in a better way. And it's also Windows Phone specific. So now we're at the end of this application here. So I have my news application. It shows me a couple of things inside here that are statically defined. Let's leave it like that. And now our customer asks us, can you please port this to Windows 8? 8.1, sorry. And we sigh for a second and say, well, that's going to cost you a lot of money. Because it's really just a button press, right? So I do right-click, add Windows 8.1. It asks me, I'm going to create 2 new projects. I'm going to create the Windows 8.1 project. I'm going to create a new shared project. And I'm going to do some changes to your project to make a reference to that shared thing. Just click OK. I rely on Visual Studio to do its thing. Hopefully it works. And now we have a new thing here. So we have the Windows 8. And we have Windows Phone here, as we have before. And under References, you'll see that we have a reference to the shared project. And the shared project here has a really odd-looking icon. This is because it's not supposed to be confused with a real project. If we go into this folder, it actually creates a folder on disk, but it's not a real project. We have like a new project file called SH project, which is short for shared project. Someone was really smart. So what I can do now, I want to run this application again for Windows Phone, just to make sure that it still works. It still looks the same as it did before. And it still works. It still runs exactly the same as we experienced. And then I go ahead here and change to run this project on my local machine and run this application again. And it doesn't look anything at all like we want, right? So the problem is that there's really nothing in the shared solution here. So I need to add all the things I have up here to my shared project, which sounds really harder than it is. I'll just move everything down. Let's set Windows Phone as a startup project again, just to make sure that this still works. So that still worked for the Windows Phone. We compile, it deployed to my phone here, and there's really nothing at all except a reference to the shared project in the Windows Phone app. Now, if I go down to the Windows 8 here, the reason that this works so good is because I have the app.saml and the main page.saml in here already. So if I run the Windows application again now, it's still going to show me a blank screen because Windows 8 here will override these views, which isn't really what we want to do. So I delete these here, and now I try to compile the application. It's going to give me a lot of compilation errors. And the reason for this is because, remember I told you before that everything in here will be copied into the project during compile time, and it will compile that with the project. I don't have a reference to Caliburn, and we have platform-specific things in the shared code here. So what I need to do is, of course, I need to go down to my package manager. I need to install Caliburn into the Windows app. When this is installed, I can compile again and see that I should only get a couple of errors. I hope. So let's go ahead and get rid of the platform-specific code in here. Remember that I showed you before that we have to do these if this is a Windows Phone app. We have to hook that up, and we don't need this method if it's not a Windows Phone app. We compile this again, and now we start to get all these ugly things that we don't really want to have in here. So for some reason, I've probably forgotten something. Let's try this again. What did I forget in my... Oh, that's interesting. This should have worked. I'm bummed out. Let's just move this up to the Windows. And let's move this up here again. Let's get rid of that from the shared project. I swear to you, I tried this like 100 times before I did this here. And
You're missing the reference.
Sorry?
You're missing the Windows Phone reference. It's probably the only thing that's
Oh, it's this. You found all the errors. That's well, something else. Different place. Well, that should still work because they're sharing the. I think you're right that I have a reference somewhere to something in the shared things here, which I shouldn't have. So if I go into the details view here again, there is most likely a problem with doing this. I'm probably...
What is app derived from?
So the app file, so the app file derives from these two are together, so they should be working. Let's just get rid of this here and try that again. Yeah, delete solution. Let's redo everything. Let's stay here until the morning. Should be fine if I redo this. Oh, I hope. Let's compile that. That worked. Let's do this another time. I told you it's going to be expensive with the customer. It takes too much time. That's interesting. So now you can't even do.
No, you click on the project. You can't have project.
Sorry.
Click on the solution.
There we go. So as long as you have the shared thing, you can re-add the Windows Phone, Windows 8 app. All right, let's try this one file by one and see which fails. If I just compile this, it should work. And let's bring over the views in the app. First, let's get rid of these here. We have them there, so I can get rid of them in my phone app. I need to install Caliburn. It's one project. Let's compile that again and see if it works. The view models needs to be down here as well. And in the view models, we have the right. So now it looks better. Still get exceptions, but it's due to whatever I have in here. So I'm going to skip that step, and I'm going to add the details views to the corresponding platforms by adding the views folder up here. So we can simply create the folder views down here as well. We can copy the details views over and just get rid of the platform-specific code, which I already did anyway, so that's good. Still fails. Lucky enough, I've done this before. Let's open one of them and see if it's still. It's not going to have the same fancy naming, but so it's the same structure here. We hopefully, if I compile this, it works. Yeah, that works better. So it's the exactly same structure. I have my view models down here in the shared. I have the views. I have the view models. However, the change that I've done here, compared to what we had before, is that I've moved up the details view here. So we have this platform-specific thing inside the Windows Phone app, and if we go down to the Windows 8 version, we don't have that. Instead, inside the details view, what I have in here is that I'm doing this Caliburn magic again. So I have the event tabbed here. Then I now invoke the back thing, and I've added that inside the page.bottom bar. So that's Windows specific for tablets or for desktop applications. You can have that in your phones as well, but it doesn't really look the same as it does on these devices. So on the phone, you'll get this dotted thing on the bottom, so you can click that and it pops up a menu. On the tablet, you need to swipe right. Yeah, you swipe or right click with the mouse. So if I run this here for my desktop, I can click these here. It goes in and it opens up these different web things that we saw before. And now that I right-click there, it shows me something that looks platform-specific. So I have this back theme down here, and it should hopefully work good, and it does. So now we have a separation between the Windows desktop and the phones. And it was pretty easy to do that when it works. So I simply just had to add this views folder and add the views in here. If I had 5 more minutes, I would probably have figured it out. It's very sensitive, so that's one of the problems with going with these universal applications. So you don't really know what's failing. So the problem was that I got a lot of different errors due to that. You couldn't compile the app file, which is really not telling me that much. It can be that I'm missing a reference. It can be that I'm using a file in this shared project. It could be like I'm referencing something in here which isn't supported by the Windows platform, but it's supported by the Windows phone. So it's not really perfect yet, but it's getting there. It's really easy just to take a Windows Phone app and port that to the Windows 8 instead. So now I want to show you one more thing. I want to add support for Azure. So what I want to change here now, I don't really need to add anything platform specific. I just want to change that these statically defined things are stored in Azure instead. So we have these in the main view model here. So these here, I want to move them to Azure. Now, in order to do that, I need to go into the Azure portal, and I want to create something called a mobile service. So the mobile services lets us connect to the cloud and create data in the cloud really nicely. I'll show you here in a second why it's so cool. So sort of you just give your application an application key, and you can create records and you can create data in tables. So you don't really need to set up your own database. You don't need to do anything like that. You just store your records in the cloud. So here I have a table called news item. First of all, I've gone into the mobile services tab in Azure. I've said that I want to create a new mobile service. I've just given it a name. I pointed it to a database that I have in Azure. You need to have that so you can store your data, of course, but you don't need to manage that yourself. I have 20 megabytes for free. I've given this a news app. I've given it that a name, and it gets a news app new.azuremobile.net. And I can define where I want this. I can define what backend I want. So in this case, I have JavaScript, or you can do it in .NET. What that means is that when your data is inserted into the mobile service, you can control things with this language. So I'll show you here. I've created something called the Universal App Test. So I have data. Under data, I have a table called news item. And here I can see a lot of different things. So we have the heading up here and the URI. That's the only things that I told my thing to have. The ID here is created by Azure, created at, updated at, and the version, all that is added by Azure. So I have a lot of records in here. I can go ahead and delete records if I want to do that. I can't add things from in here. You need to have an app to add stuff. So the backend that I talked about is a scripting thing here. So I can go to the scripting tab, and I can say that when I'm inserting an item, or updating, deleting, or reading an item, I want to do something specific here. You see that I get a reference to a user here. That's the user that is currently trying to insert something. So that can be an anonymous user, or I can require this user to be authenticated. And what I can do with authentication is that I can set up both Twitter, Facebook, and Microsoft authentication to work with this integrated. So there's possibilities to do that with the mobile services. So I simply say that I have a Facebook app. Here's the app key and the app secret. Now people can authenticate to my app using Facebook. And when they insert a record, I get the token of their username, and I can connect them to which user they are. And that's all pretty cool. So I have my data in here, and I want to connect to that. And the way that I do that is that if you go back to the dashboard, or to this one here, this is the first thing that you see when you create this mobile service. So we can get a sample application for Windows Store, Windows Phone 8, iOS, Android, HTML, Xamarin, and PhoneGap. And what this gives us is that it tells us how to connect to this. I can either download a project, or it tells me that you just need to add this to your project, you just need to do this here, you just need to do this here, and you have data in the file. And then you can read from this, you can write this, you can authenticate this, and it also works pretty good. And I'll show you what this looks like from the code. So I won't bother writing all the code, it's quite a lot of code. So basically, I'll set up a repository that acts as a communicator to my mobile service, and I just request the data from that and convert that to a view model. It's pretty simple. Microsoft makes it simpler than it might be if you want to set up these things by yourself. If you want to create a web API and add authentication for Twitter, Facebook, MSN, and all that, it can take some time. Doing this with the mobile services is quite much easier than that. If this loads, there we go. So now we have a new project in here called Portable, Data Portable. This is a portable class libraries. They're commonly used when you want to share code between different types of platforms. So in this case, I'm going to share code between Windows Phone 8 and the Windows 8 platform. And all I've added in here is a repository and a news item. And the repository has the code that I copied from Azure Mobile Service. And what this simply does is initializes my mobile service client. And then I have a method here called getAll. So what I say here is that use the mobile service with these credentials, get the table news item, and just return a list, and this is all asynchronous. So I could spin up a nice loading icon, I could get the result back, I can work on the UI thread after that, I can do the async and await programming model very nicely doing this. And then I have a method here for creating default records. Now I'm doing this every time that I run the application, but it simply does the same thing. So it tells the mobile service to get the table news item. I'm inserting the data for the news item. And there's a flag in the mobile services that says, do you want to dynamically create data? And if you say that, it dynamically changes your model in the database according to what you insert. Now, when you go to production, you want to turn that off, right? You don't want to changing the schema when it's in production. That's not really a good idea, right? So, and I have a iRepository down here. I like to have interfaces for all my repositories. And then I just return a simple news item. So I have the ID in here, I have my heading, and I have my URI. All the other things, I could add the created ad, updated ad, and all that, but I don't really need that in here. So I've added a reference to the Windows 8 project to this one here. So the Windows 8 project has a reference to the shared project, and it also has a reference to the data project. And if I run this here, I can start by running the Windows Phone, which works similarly. And this should look the same as we saw before. So it should show us a list of items when this is deployed. It's going to give us a quite long list. So I'm using the observable collection here. I don't have a loading icon, but it's loading in the backend. So when it starts getting data, it's going to pop this in here. I hope. It should work in a second. Yay. So here I get a lot of data, right? So I can click this Microsoft Open Sources, the C# compiler. Takes you to an awesome blog. I can click back. I can do all. The thing here, though, that when I click the back button, remember that I said before, so per instance, per request, create a new instance of the view model. So what happens is, in the view model, let me show you this. We have the view model in the shared folder. So the shared project down here is the project working with the repository. So we have the main view model. The main view model is simply saying, I want to load all the data. So it's doing that in the constructor. We should possibly do that somewhere else, but I'm doing it like that now. And the problem is that it's going to create an instance of the view model each time that I want to navigate to the view model, which means that each time I navigate to the view model, it's going to load the data. So there's possibilities for us to optimize this. And we can do that by telling Caliburn that I want a singleton instance. So just create one instance per application. And that's all there is to it. So both of our projects here, as we're in the shared thing down here, and the main view model communicates with the repository, what I need to do is that I need a reference to the data project in both the Windows Phone and the Windows 8 project. So if I remove the reference here and compile this, it should tell me that I have no idea what you're talking about. But I can still build the Windows Phone version. So that's what happened before when I showed you the things that didn't work, is that I probably forgot to add a reference to something, and that's why it just blindly fails. Doesn't give you the best exceptions always, but that's good enough. All right. So you could also, for Windows Phone and for the Windows platform, add these authentication with Twitter and Facebook and MSN. And that's really easy. It's just a sort of a flag. You tell the mobile service that fire up this window here and let the user log in. And when that's done, here's the result. It's all asynchronous and it's already really, really great. All right, so do we have any questions? No questions? Is everything super clear? I think it's pretty cool that you can just take these Windows Phone applications and then sort of convert this into the Windows 8 app. And if you compare this to creating the Windows 8 app from start, I expect this being much faster. Yep.
Does this work for Windows 8.0? Or is it specifically only for the 8.1 and the latest?
Yeah, it's specifically to the latest things. Yeah.
So would it work for 8.1 that's currently out, or we have to wait for the stuff?
I think you need to wait for the update 1, or the update, which is, it's released now, but it's not to consumer. So you have to wait for that. And that's going to be I think that's going to be the point where Microsoft says this is the platform that you need to be on right now if you're on Windows 8. Yep.
Is Caliban open source, or is it just shared NuGet package?
I think it's open source. It's on GitHub. 2.0 is on GitHub. It was on Codeplex before. It's not really the best documented framework. It's really hard to get around their wiki, but when you get used to it and just fire up and play with it, it's really a good framework. Yep.
Once we upgrade to the Windows 8.1, do we still have the Windows Phone 8 to compile?
If you update to Windows Phone 8, if you update to Windows 8.1,
yeah, and can we still make a Windows Phone 8 apps?
Can you still make Windows 8 Phone 8 apps? Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can do that. You can always go lower.
Yeah.
Yep.
I tried doing that and I only had 8.1. Like I installed
Let's have a look.
8.1.
Yep.
I've got Visual Studio 2013. Installed 8.1. I didn't install 8 and upgrade. I installed 8.1.
Yep.
Installed Visual Studio, and the only option for the target application was 8.1. I couldn't make an 8.0.
So you installed the latest update and you tried to create an older Windows Phone app and that didn't work?
I didn't give any option.
I think it depends which option you choose when you create a project.
Did you create a universal app or did you just go to the Windows Phone app? Because I've developed Windows older applications with the newest update. I haven't tried creating them.
I haven't been able to get this one with the universal app. I couldn't get the
You probably can't create. You probably can't create.
Yes, you can.
About 2 weeks ago, I tried updating my Visual Studio 2013
Yeah.
to get the universal apps because the email came out.
Right.
And I just wouldn't update, wouldn't do anything.
You can create universal app for 8.0, but if you get just Windows Phone app, it can be for 8.0.
Okay.
So you don't need to go to the universal app folder. Go to Windows Phone folder, and then you should be able to change.
I only had one option.
Yeah, it seems like I tried creating an app here and just the only target is 8.1.
Okay.
So it might be a limitation now, or there might be some way for you to create the older apps as well. But you've been able to do that before, haven't you? When you have 8, we were able to create 7.5 or 7. I'm unsure. You might have to install the older SDK again. I can look it up and see if there's anything useful. All right. Oh, you have one more question?
Yeah. Actually, I saw you initialize Windows RT service.
Yep.
So I just feel a little confused.
All right. So It's both called RT. It's WinRT on both the phone now and on Windows. So they share the same runtime. So it's both called Windows Runtime. WinRT. So that's why you do that. Previously, you did with Caliburn, you did initialize WinRT and you had to do initialize phone.
Okay.
But now it's mixed together, so they're both WinRT, which is pretty good. And another cool thing with the universal apps is that when you target an application for Windows Phone and someone buys it on the Windows Phone, they will also have it purchased if you publish it to the Windows Store. So you don't have to buy it twice, which is good for the consumer, right? But bad for us that develop the applications. All right, if there's no more questions, just ping me if you come up with anything. Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me.